Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Forum on Safety. My name is Peter Lattanzio and I am the Chief of the Town of Colonie Department of Fire Services. And today our guest is Deputy Chief Peter Barry from the Town of Colonie Department of Emergency Medical Services. Pete, welcome to our show today.
Thanks for having me on, Pete.
Glad you could be here. Pete, what I'd like you to tell our viewers out there is, what is the Town of Colonie EMS Department all about?
Well, the EMS department was formed in 1989 as a result of a consolidation of 6 volunteer ambulance services. It is a combination department. We do have what we like to refer to as career staff, who are our paid staff, and then we also have a supplemental volunteer force. Primarily the career staff is on during the day and the volunteers fill in the evening hours. We do roughly approximately 9,500 to 10,000 calls a year, requests for service here in the community. And it's a very unique relationship where we have career people and volunteer people working side by side to provide a really high quality, very efficient emergency medical services to the community here in Colonie.
Is it fair to say that Colonie is probably one of the busiest EMS providers in the Capital District?
I think we're pretty close to being one of the busiest providers in the capital region. We lend out assistance to other communities in the area, and they often do provide us assistance when it's really busy.
When you respond to all types of calls, obviously throughout the town, ranging from a dog bite to an auto accident to whatever the case may be, have you taken a look at some of your calls and kind of try to categorize them and see if there's a pattern to certain calls that develop?
Absolutely. In order to really manage our system well, we look at our call data all the time and look at some of the areas that we can make improvements, and also some of the areas that we can focus public education to hopefully prevent some incidents. And one of those areas that we've really looked at, a lot of people would think that the majority of the incidents we respond to are heart-related cases and so forth. And they are a big part of our business, but one of the key things that we do respond to an awful lot are falls. And in looking at the number of falls that we respond to, we really felt that there may be something that we can do through public education, such as programs like this, to bring forward the message that falls are a huge problem in our community, and there is something that we can all do about it.
Well, just to clarify a little bit, when you refer to falls, you're not talking about somebody who's climbed up onto a roof and fallen off a ladder, fallen down the stair. What exactly falls into that
Really
category?
falls in the home, Pete. One of the things that we respond to an awful lot are just falls in the home. These are just everyday mobility issues where people are trying to navigate through their homes, going about everyday tasks, and they fall in the home. These equate to an awful lot of the numbers of falls that we respond to. Yeah, we do the falling off the ladder and those types of things, but they don't really equate to the numbers that we see of falls in the home just by pure mobility and moving around the house.
Is there a certain population that seems to be more prone to these categories of falls that you're seeing?
Definitely seniors. Seniors have a lot of risk factors, and really in looking at our data, if you look at a particular demographic of the population that's a higher risk to falls, it is our senior population.
And this probably comes in for a variety of reasons. Again, age, limited mobility, sometimes medications, those type of things. Are those all factors that come into this?
Yeah, Pete, there's really 2 factors that we really looked at. Intrinsic factors, which are factors within the body that have an effect, such as you mentioned, medications. Anyone really that we found, and we really compared a study that we did to national data, anyone that's taking more than 4 different medications for different related medical problems is at a much higher risk of falls than others. The reason is the side effects to these medications can cause dizziness, sleepiness, blurred vision, and other things that will have a direct impact on their balance and their ability to move around the home easily without falling. Those people are really at high risk. And extrinsic causes are causes in the home for either poor lighting, lack of handrails, not using mobility aids such as canes and walkers.
Clutter.
Things like that. Clutter around the house, it's a big issue. Keeping those walkways and pathways clear in the residence are some of the extrinsic, or what we like to refer to as environmental causes of some of the falls. So that really the senior falls is really an area that we've tried to focus some education on here in the community. We've gone out to some of the senior clubs. We've worked with some of the senior advisory committees to try to get some education out there to seniors that there's ways to prevent falls, and that falls have a huge impact on quality of life. And if we can just prevent a fall, we can ensure a good quality of life for a longer period of time. So it's a huge issue here.
And when we see these folks fall, for whatever reason it may be, we're not just talking they're falling down and bumping their head. We end up with all types of injuries as a result of these falls, don't we?
Yeah, really, and sometimes it's really painful for our crews. When somebody falls and has a fractured hip and it really decreases their mobility, really kind of zaps their strength. And after they have fallen and had a resultant injury like that, it really makes them much more susceptible for future falls and future exposures to EMS and the hospital. And that's why it's so critical that we prevent those initial falls. Because once they've had that fracture, they've had that hospitalization, and the complications associated with that hospitalization, it really increases their risk for future falls.
When we going back to the medication portion of it, people really need to pay attention to what they're taking and the warnings that go on those labels. Very often they do have those warnings that drowsy and don't operate machinery, drive a car. But again, it trickles right back to getting around inside the house where they could have some issues.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we do in our educational piece with seniors is try to encourage them to work very closely with their physicians. Not only do we encourage the patients, but we encourage care providers, family members to work with the physicians to make sure they're at the right therapeutic dose so that they're not over-medicated. And one of the difficulties about doing this is that they may have one or more physicians that prescribe the medications. So it may be coordinating care with multiple doctors, working with the pharmacist that they use to make sure that the therapeutic values of those medications are right where they need to be so that they're not over-medicated, so they don't have a higher risk of the drowsiness or sleepiness or dizziness that might occur to being over-medicated. So it's really a coordinated effort amongst their medical staff, caregivers, and family members to make sure that they get the right dosages.
I think that's a key point when you talk about family members. I mean, again, mom and dad or whoever's in the family get a medication, somebody should really be keeping an eye on them to make sure that there's no effects, and if there is, they should be touching base back with their physician and let them know about that. Because those type of things, again, if that person becomes affected by the medication, it could lead them down the wrong road and get them in trouble.
Quality of life is huge, and we really want our citizens here in the town of Colonie to have a great quality of life. That's why I'm so glad you invited me on the program. I think that if there is any disruption in their quality of life from taking a particular medication, no matter how important that medication is, it's important that they relay that to their physician or their care provider and say, hey, listen, this medication is really causing me to have difficulty with my vision, it's causing difficulty, I'm tired, I'm dizzy. They really need to relay those symptoms to their physician so that, again, the dosages can be tweaked so that they have a good, productive quality of life while they're also treating their underlying medical problem.
Do you find any hesitancy on the residents' part to maybe relay that information to the doctor? Do you think they're afraid to pass that information along, or do they think that, well, maybe this is just part of the medication that I'm on? So do you see any hesitancy there from the folks?
I think that's a big part of it. A lot of people just take it for granted that I'm on medication and that there's going to be side effects and you just have to deal with those side effects. And that's not necessarily always true. It's important to really talk to your physician, get them involved, and get all of your physicians involved if needs be, if you have multiple physicians, so that you explain to them what's going on and work with them so that you get the best therapeutic value for the underlying medical condition, but it also doesn't have a tremendous impact on your quality of life. And an impact so bad that it can create a fall or another medical problem that really reduces your mobility in the future.
You and I have both been into all kinds of folks' house throughout the town. And we kind of touched on this a little bit with clutter. I know that becomes a major issue for a lot of folks. They get newspapers and they get magazines, they just get all types of stuff, which, you know, for some reason or another, it doesn't get disposed of into the trash. And before you know, one thing leads to another. And we've seen many, and I know that you folks have seen it too, a lot of houses that have a lot of this clutter in. I know on our side of the fence with the fire service, it's a concern because this really increases the fire hazard inside that house. But for you guys, it's got to be a horrendous problem, even getting to your patients sometimes.
It is, and a big portion of the educational piece is really looking at those extrinsic causes, those environmental causes, and getting family and patients and people involved in making sure that there is limited clutter. Things are picked up and put away. If there are toddlers, grandchildren, things like that, that their toys are kept away from stairways and walkways and pathways, that they reduce newspapers, garbage, anything like that that can cause a fall. We also look at other things like lighting, making sure that there's adequate lighting in the residence, making sure that if they have mobility aids, they're actually using them. One of the things that's really difficult, and some of our seniors are a little riskier taker than others that we've seen in our study, is that they don't like to use their mobility aids. They like to hold on to their independence. And those mobility aids are really there designed to prevent them from having injuries.
When you talk about mobility aids, what are you talking about? Are you talking about walkers? Are you talking about canes?
Exactly. Walkers, canes, anything that's used to help them with their mobility and to keep them active and keep them moving. Mm-hmm. They're really safeguards to prevent an accident from happening. However, one of the things that our data did show us is that a lot of falls occur because they're not utilizing those mobility aids.
Even though they are available to them in their homes?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's really important. Along with the medications, one of the other intrinsic things that we also encourage them to do is their vision is really important. So getting regular checkups, making sure that you have the appropriate eyeglasses and that their vision is as good as it possibly can be, because that will also help them to navigate their way through their homes and any other locations that they go to make sure that they don't come across a hazard and trip and fall over it.
You and I have had this discussion before about bathrooms seem to be a particular problem for you guys. Can you explain to our folks where you run into your problems with bathrooms?
Absolutely. When people are sick, they generally find their way to the bathroom, one way or the other. Bathrooms are usually small in nature. They either do or do not have the appropriate handles and grab rails to assist them when they're sick. And part of the other problem is they generally lock themselves in. This creates a problem when they have a medical event in the bathroom and they're locked in. And in a lot of cases, doors are historically designed to open inward into bathrooms. And the problem is when somebody has a problem in a bathroom and they collapse, they generally block the doorway is locked, and any type of forcible entry into the bathroom can cause an injury to the patient.
So you could injure them just trying to get into them?
Absolutely, and in some cases it can happen, and it's always something that we try to bring up with any developer that we come across, is that bathrooms that are designed for senior citizens need to be a little bit larger. The commodes need to be placed in a fashion where that if somebody does collapse while they're trying to go to the bathroom, they don't block the doorway. And we often encourage them to try to put the doorways in different positions or to swing in different directions so that they don't block the patient into the bathroom and we can't gain access.
I know since you've been doing a lot of research into this, and you and I have talked about this, I've been involved with many plan reviews for a lot of these new complexes, and that is something that we bring up constantly, talk about possibly pocket doors or sliding doors, so that you folks, if somebody does go down there, would have very easy access. And what we're finding is a lot of the developers, it's never even dawned on them before that this was an issue. So this is bringing a whole new light to them, and it's not only happening now in Colonie, that they're starting to look at these complexes all over the place that they build, and hopefully we can make that situation a little bit better.
The nice part about it is we are starting to make some strides. I think with the cooperation we have with your department, being involved in the senior advisory board, I think that we are starting to have an impact on some of the developers. They're starting to come, they're starting to ask questions, they're starting to take some of our advice, in particular with the size elevators that they put in these complexes. And I think they're making safer environments for our seniors to live in here in Colonie, which is very encouraging. We want to continue to push farther to make them safer in our community, and it's our hope that the developers will listen.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that they're actually looking at this stuff now, and I just had a meeting the other day with an architect who brought it up to me that we're going to make sure that this elevator is large enough to accommodate an EMS stretcher. So things that these folks never thought about before, they're now thinking about. So hopefully this is going to make it better for everybody all the way around.
And we want to see them go in a lot of different directions. We want to get them thinking really outside the box. We want them to think about, where's the garbage collection done? Where is recyclables pickup done? The pitch of the walkways. We want to have them really take a fall safety approach to a building or an apartment design that will really look at different areas that can cause problems or places that seniors will get themselves in that can potentially be hazardous, to try to eliminate those through design. And some of them are truly listening, and it's our hope that we can continue to make strides to make the designs of senior homes safer here in Colonie.
Well, I know just from having conversations with you, you've educated me as to what to look for. And again, I think that's trickling back out into the field with these developers, and it's going to make a difference. Now, I got a couple of photographs that show some grab rails in the bathroom.
Yep.
And you can see there's a grab rail around the back of the toilet and one up the side. And those seem to be good locations. I mean, that's usually what's required by the handicap code, but those seem to be very workable for folks and make a lot of difference as far as you're concerned.
Absolutely. And again, you know, everybody seems to find themselves in the bathroom when they're really sick. And when they're sick, they're in a weakened state. Grab rails are essential, along with lighting. And I think that anyone that has a senior family member, whether they're living at home or they're living alone and they're a caregiver and provide assistance, they want to make sure that they have adequate handrails and that they're installed properly. That's huge.
Absolutely.
And I know you were going to touch on that, is to make sure that they're installed properly so that they can provide some assistance to the senior when they need them.
Part of my job is going out and inspecting buildings, and one of the things that we look for constantly when we go in, when there's handicap facilities, we always grab onto those handrails and make sure that they're anchored well into the wall. And it's amazing the number of times that we're able to latch onto that grab rail and pull it right off and hand it right back to the contractor and say, you got to fix this. They forget to put blocking in the walls, or even if they don't put the blocking, at least lag those into the studs that are in the wall. And here you've got somebody who thinks that's going to work, they put their weight on it, and down they go.
Yeah.
So I would say, again, if somebody has some type of work done where they have these grab rails installed, make sure they're in good and solid so that when you go to use them and you put some weight on them, that they're going to hold your weight and do what they're supposed to do. We've also got a photograph of one inside a bathtub. And again, this was shot at a hotel, so this is what a handicap room would look like at a hotel, but you could easily do this in your own residence too.
Absolutely. Yep.
So,
absolutely.
what other tips could you pass along to folks maybe to try and keep themselves out of trouble as far as the falls go?
I know one of the things that I know we're getting into, hopefully spring and soon summer. The wintertime, we always have some tragedies in the wintertime where people venture out, whether it be to get the mail, get the newspaper, and they're inappropriately dressed. And usually because the fact that there's been snow or ice or a situation where you've had a thaw and then a freeze and you've got ice developing on the walkways, there's a slip and fall. And because they're inappropriately dressed and because of their age, they're immediately exposed to hypothermia. And we inevitably get a few cases every year where a senior ventures out to get mail, the newspaper or something like that, and they suffer a slip and fall. They're inappropriately dressed for the weather, and Not only do they suffer an injury from the fall, but they also suffer from severe hypothermia. And it's something that we try very hard to educate them on. And again, it goes back to, again, education of designers and architects that to really look at where they're going to have deliveries of mail and so forth, because seniors are going to venture out to get those things, and we want to make sure that they have a safe pathway to get there and return to the residence without an injury. And unfortunately, in the wintertime, that is one of the most hazardous times for seniors to venture out, and they inevitably suffer falls.
I know we're past that season for right
Yep.
now, thankfully.
Yes, thankfully.
But the black ice, I see it at my house. There's been numerous times when I've gone out onto my driveway to go to get into the car, and it looks wet, but it's actually an ice patch, and sure enough, you lose your footing underneath it. What about this time of the year with the warm weather approaching? Do we have the opposite issue now with heat exhaustion and dehydration?
Absolutely. The elderly and even young people have a difficult time with temperature regulation. And seniors tend to overdress, and when they go out and they get caught, and in particular during periods like this where we have days that are 80 degrees and then we have days that are 60 degrees, people don't necessarily know how to dress. And they'll go out, they'll be overdressed, they'll get overheated very easily, and they just don't have that reserve capacity to deal with that, and it gets them into problems. And it's very important that they dress appropriately for the weather, not only in the wintertime but also in the summer.
What about the hydration issue? That seems to be a big thing, and I know my father's recently been involved in some medical procedures, and one of the things that doctors keep saying is you need to drink, you need to get a lot of liquids on board. And he's not a big water drinker, so he has a little issue with that.
Yep. Nutrition and hydration kind of go hand in hand with fall prevention, because if you don't have your strength, you have a difficult time as well navigating. And nutrition and hydration really kind of go hand in hand. We want to make sure that they have adequate nutrition and they're adequately hydrated. Hydration is huge, not only after medical procedures, such as you mentioned with your father, but if they're sick in any way, shape, or form, they can become dehydrated very easily because they lack the reserve of young, healthy people. So it's very important that they get adequate nutrition and hydration.
And when you become dehydrated, does that lead to some maybe loss of coordination, or what medical implications does that have when you become dehydrated?
Well, depending on what kind of underlying problems they have, it can lead to low blood pressure, which can lead to episodes of fainting or syncope. Will definitely zap their strength, and they won't have that coordination and the strength to do the things that they normally would. So staying adequately hydrated is extremely important. And getting good nutrition. One of the problems with weather, not only severe cold or even severe heat, is it prevents people from venturing outside. They either want to stay in where it's warm or they want to stay in where it's cool. And therefore they don't go out, they don't make sure they get adequate groceries and the right things that they need to be eating. They may not go and get their medications refilled because the weather's too bad or it's too hot, and they just don't want to venture out because it's too hot and want to stay in where the air conditioning is. And that's also a problem.
So a diet of ice cream sandwiches is definitely not a good idea?
Not a good idea, no. No, not a good idea.
Is there any other issues that you run into? What about like house numbering? And I know when we get an emergency call, trying to get to a house as quick as you can safely, that's your main goal. You ever run into issues where you can't find the house because of house numbering issues?
All the time. In particular, houses that are located back off a street have a relatively long driveway. Those are issues. But just everyday house calls, and I know the fire service has this problem too, is that a lot of house numbers are not appropriately displayed and they're not large enough to be seen. They're not reflective so that they can be spotted easily at night. And that's a huge issue here in the town. It's very important that people make sure that the number is on their house, it's very visible, it's reflective so that we can pick it up. And if you're on a long driveway, you have some kind of a plate mounted out near the roadway so that your house number can be easily located.
Yeah, that's something that we've definitely been pushing. If it's not reflective, at least if it doesn't blend in with the house, you have a yellow colored siding, put black numbers up. Put them large enough so that people can find you. But that is something that has been a concern for the fire service, I know, with EMS and the police department also. And I think people need to realize that, you know, you can have a problem inside your house, and you get on that phone and you dial 911, yet it seems to take a long time for somebody to get there, and then you watch the police car, the ambulance drive past your house and say, what's going on? I'm right here, and they don't realize that we can't find you because of something as simple as a house number.
Exactly.
You know, we've seen other issues too with plantings. You know, people hang up plants, hanging pots, flags, decorations, different things that will hang out and obstruct those numbers. And again, it makes it very difficult for us folks in emergency services to follow or find somebody.
Yeah, one of the things that we hope in this pre-9/11 world that we live in is that each and every one of us take some time for preparedness. You know, whether it be making your home fall safe or injury safe, fire safe, but also being prepared for emergencies, which means making sure you have a good visible house number so that emergency services can find you quickly. Those are all personal responsibilities that we need every citizen to take on and make sure that they're safe in their home and we can find them quickly and effectively so that we can provide the services they need to survive some type of an incident.
Great. Pete, you have supplied us with a ton of information today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the folks out there do. I would like to thank you for coming in today and being our guest, and we will have you back in the future. Whether you want to be here or not, we'll have you back in the future. One thing that I would like to say to folks out there, if you do have questions that pertain to EMS, to the fire service or police, give us a call. Our number is going to be on the screen, also an email address, and please phone in your request or type in your request, and we'll get the appropriate answer for you and get it back to you. And maybe your question will lead to a whole show that we can do to get information out. It may not only be affecting you, it could be affecting a lot of folks. So we'd love to hear from you, and we will get those answers for you as quick as we can. Thanks for tuning in today, and we hope to see you again in the future.